Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Can you hear me? Yeah. How you doing?
Good. Good. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to do this in my car.
I hope you're
One
not driving.
right there. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. It's like impossible.
I'm just gonna run down and get a glass of water just in case my voice
I'm
goes.
gonna-
I'll be right back.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Audrey, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Just panicked a little bit there. Hello, Megan.
Hi, Maria. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Looking forward to the presentation today.
I know. So I've given you guys the ability to share your screen. So hopefully that won't be an issue.
Great. Yeah, I'll be the one sharing the presentation today.
Okay.
Maria, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is the quietest Zoom I've
I
ever
know,
seen.
I know. I'm kind of afraid because I feel like it's so noisy here, but I don't know. I was just going
Doing
to
well.
give another 2 minutes as people join us.
I have the munchies. No, I can't.
I think a lot of people have their camera off because they're probably eating lunch. So I would just like to say I'm a proponent of food. So definitely don't feel like you have to have your cameras off if you're eating. Like it's the lunch hour. So we like to keep the presentation informal and engaged.
Yep.
I was huddling in a corner, scoffing down my lunch.
Right.
It's a regular lunch and learn.
Is everyone having a good day so far?
Living the dream.
Yep.
Is that the dream, working from home, drinking coffee, or what's the dream?
Being on this side of the dirt.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That works for me. Every day you wake up is a good day.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm in an absolutely lovely parking lot. It's just beautiful.
Well, at least you're not driving.
No, that I couldn't do. But it says I have a beautiful view of Popeyes. A lot of people would appreciate that. I personally have never been there, but I know it's a phase.
Well, I am sitting in the parking lot of Rowan College at the Mount Laurel campus. And I'm about to do a podcast in about an hour or so,
Awesome.
called the Baroness Project.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I have beautiful collegiate surroundings.
What's the Baroness
Yes.
Project?
It's a podcast. It's a podcast. It's what they called this month's or the next couple of months podcasts where they're interviewing women in business, women in leadership, and they're sharing it with their students, for future thoughts about where they would like to take their career.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. So to be respectful of everyone's time, I know we have a huge number of people signed up and not as many of those people are on right now, but I will let them come in as they join. But I do want to be respectful of our time here today. And so my name is Maria Veglia, and I am the co-chair of the events committee, along with Denise Perot. We are excited to have you here today. We're excited to have William and Megan here with us to share information about the cannabis industry. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the noise around me too much?
Yes.
You can hear, it's too, okay. Thank you. You know, it's been something in the works for a while in New Jersey, and obviously there are states that have, you know, come before us. Some of states have transitioned into legal adult use fairly well, and some states haven't. So it would be interesting from a couple perspectives to understand how New Jersey is approaching this, what is the impact as an employee, as an employer, and, you know, as a business owner, you know, to know really maybe even if there's opportunity for small business owners or any business owner in this space. So today we are really fortunate to have both Megan and William. And I just want to say that I'm really, really grateful to Megan and William because there was an original presenter that was scheduled who unfortunately came down with COVID. And so William has agreed to participate and at very short notice, and we are very, very appreciative. So to give you a glimpse into our two professionals, Megan Baum.
That's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
I always feel like I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly. Is a partner with Highland Levine Shapiro, and she concentrates her practice in the areas of employment, counseling, and commercial litigation. Megan is known to be very hardworking and a meticulous attorney. She is described as highly intelligent, enthusiastic, and compassionate. She has a go-getter, can-do attitude, and she's devoted to serving both large and small businesses. We have the honor of serving with Megan on the board for NABO South Jersey, and so we're really excited and appreciative to have her with us today. Her colleague, William Hanna, is an associate with the firm as well, practices in the areas of real estate, franchise law, and community associations. His real estate practice focuses on purchase and sales transactions, leasing and loan transactions. He also represents multifamily apartment building owners in acquisitions and financing, and retail and office landlords in leasing matters. So I'm going to kind of just open the floor and invite Megan and William to share their information with us. I guess in terms of questions, we want everyone to feel comfortable to ask questions. If you want, you could type the question in the chat, and Megan and William will get to them at the end of their presentation, or at the end of the presentation, we're going to open up the floor for questions as well. Okay. So thank you very much. And here's Megan and William.
Great.
Great
Thanks so
introduction.
much, Maria. I really appreciate the introduction. It's great to be with everybody. We're going to try and keep this interactive and interesting. I am very much a fan of questions, so throw them in the chat. Looks like we already have one in the chat. So I see it. Thank you, Christine. We're going to get into the presentation a bit, and then hopefully we'll be able to answer that for you as we get a little further in. So the presentation today is going to focus in two parts. The first part is going to be an overview of the cannabis business industry in New Jersey and the different license applications that are available. And it's going to look at New Jersey compared to some other states. Will is going to be handling that part of the presentation. Thank you, Will. And then the second part of the presentation is going to be focused on the employment aspects of the legalization of marijuana. And if you have an employee that is using marijuana, what are the different regulations and things you need to be aware of in the cannabis industry as we're moving forward and it becomes legalized, and in particular with the intersection between state and federal law, which can be a little difficult to follow. So we have a PowerPoint today, so I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that. And we are going to take it away. So Will?
All right. Thanks, Megan. So marijuana is legal. There's somewhat of a big asterisk that comes with that. And it's that it's legal according to state law in New Jersey. It was legalized in New Jersey through the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Modernization Act, kind of a mouthful. It was signed into law in February 2021. It permits municipalities to prohibit cannabis businesses or to allow them within their borders and regulate them. And it establishes the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which I'll refer to in the presentation as the CRC, which is charged with establishing a regulatory framework for cannabis cultivation, production, manufacturing, transportation, sale, and use. The CRC is also responsible for setting rules and for processing cannabis license applications. Now, every state has their own law on cannabis, and they can kind of be grouped into a few buckets. So there's a map up there if you could see it. The first bucket would be states where recreational use is permitted. So that's New Jersey now, and those are the green states in the map. The second bucket is states where cannabis can be used only for medical purposes. And an example of that would be Pennsylvania, and those are the blue states. And then the third bucket would be states where it remains illegal, although in some of those states it's been decriminalized, which means if you're caught with, a small amount of marijuana, they won't necessarily prosecute you. And those are the gray states in the map. So the question we get a lot is, if cannabis is still a Schedule I substance under federal law, and technically operating a cannabis business would violate that federal law, how can they exist in New Jersey? And this kind of started during the Obama administration when they enacted a few executive actions that basically said the federal government was going to relax its enforcement of cannabis-related crimes. And this culminated in something called the Cole Memo, which essentially said the DOJ, the Department of Justice, would deprioritize prosecution of federal cannabis crimes in states where the activities were legal. So if the state passed a law that said recreational cannabis is legal, here are all the minimum standards and regulations that businesses must comply with, then we're going to deprioritize prosecution of that crime, essentially. Next slide, Megan. So the law establishes a host of classes of licenses. The first license is a Class 1 cultivator license. Now, this is actually limited to only 37 licenses until February 2023. The rest of the classes, there is no limit. And this is just your standard growing recreational cannabis in a greenhouse or a farm. The Class 2 license is a manufacturer license, and this is the production of recreational use cannabis. So this would be the person or entity that would take the plant in itself and then prepare it for use. So you'd be able to, for example, buy a bunch of plants from a cultivator. You could bake them and then sell them to wholesalers or retailers. The wholesaler license is Class 3. This is a license that enables you to purchase, store, sell, transfer, or transport recreational use cannabis items. The Class 4 license is a distributor license. This would allow you to transport cannabis items in bulk between cultivators, manufacturers, retailers within the state of New Jersey only. The Class 5 license is the retailer license. This is the what you typically think of as the dispensary. This is the license that would enable you to purchase recreational use cannabis from a cultivator, a manufacturer, a wholesaler, and then sell those items to consumers in a retail store or dispensary. And then the last license that we'll talk about is the Class 6 license, which is a delivery license. So this is kind of like your DoorDash or Uber Eats for cannabis. You could potentially start a business where you transport a consumer's purchase of recreational use cannabis from the retailer or dispensary directly to the consumer. So, next slide. So how do prospective marijuana entrepreneurs obtain a license? Now that's a term that I think I made up. I haven't seen it before. This is an area that's ripe for bad puns. So that's one that I like to use. So feel free to use it. How do you apply? CRC has a website, a really good website, actually, I think. And there's a detailed application portal on there that applicants can use to apply. There's a series of questions that you answer directly online, as well as screens in the portal where you upload responsive documentation. So before we go into the application a little bit, I thought it might be good to go through a little bit of a timeline to see like the history and where we are now. So August 19, 2021, initial rules were adopted by the CRC that govern the application process. December 15, 2021, applications started for Class 1 cultivator licenses and Class 2 manufacturer licenses. And then March 15, 2022, a couple months ago, they started taking
Excuse me,
applications.
William, somebody's got a phone on or something. I'm hearing feedback in the background.
Yeah, I'm getting some
Somebody
feedback
turn that
too.
off, please. Thank you.
Okay, so March 15, 2022, a couple months ago, the application started for Class 5 retailer licenses. So as of today, they're currently accepting applications for Class 1, which is the cultivator, Class 2 manufacturer, and Class 5 retailer licenses on a rolling basis. And as of May 12, 2022, so a couple weeks ago, they had received 900 applications. They had reviewed 500 of the 900. They issued 327 cure letters. So these are applications that were missing something. They sent them a letter and said, hey, can you provide X, Y, and Z to cure your application? And then they've approved 102 conditional licenses. So there's actually, if you're interested, there's actually a list of the conditional licensees on the CRC's website. It's tough to tell if these are big companies or small businesses. My guess would be that it's a mix of multi-state operators that are coming into New Jersey and small businesses, and probably there's some joint ventures there too, where the multi-state operators are partnering with small businesses in New Jersey to apply for a license. So currently there's 12 medicinal only facilities in New Jersey, and those are the orange leaves in the orange leaves.
Excuse me
on the
again,
map.
William. Is anybody else hearing this background noise?
Yeah, I'm getting it too. Maybe if you're
Maybe somebody's got their speaker on, or you like
yeah,
turn
maybe
off
mute,
your phones,
if you could
put them on
mute
mute or
your
something.
I hear,
yeah,
I
maybe
hear
you
it
could mute
too,
yourself.
but I'm on mute.
I think everybody should turn their cell phones off to mute if they're not already.
Yeah, or just mute yourself through the Zoom. That might help too.
That's a good idea too. Thank you.
All right, so there's 12 medical only facilities in New Jersey, and those are the orange circles on that map. And then there's 12 facilities that now offer both medical and recreational cannabis for sale. And those are the green circles on the map. So these are all what are called alternative treatment centers. And these are places that already had medical licenses to sell medicinal marijuana. So they were able to apply to CRC to also sell recreationally. They had to prove to CRC that they had adequate supply to ensure that their medical patients could continue to receive their medicine. And once they were able to do so, they were approved for retail sale, and the recreational sales actually began on April 21st. So about a month ago. We can go to the next slide. So the initial rules established conditional licenses and annual licenses. The conditional license expires 120 days after issuance, and it actually does not permit the license holder to engage in the sale, manufacture, purchase, cultivation of cannabis. So if you get the conditional license, you can't really do anything yet. Rather, during the 120-day period, you're expected to establish site control over your proposed site through a lease or a purchase of property. You should seek municipal approval of the business and basically just finalize your business and your business plans. The conditional license holder may then apply to convert their license to an annual license. And the annual license is the one that will actually permit you to engage in the cultivation, sale, distribution of the cannabis products. So you can actually apply for a conditional license and then later for the conversion, or you can go directly to the annual license. But to get the annual license, you have to show a lot more than for the conditional license. So some information that's required for an annual license are there's a personal and NA disclosure forms. So they're going to want to know who's operating the business and who's handling the product. I think this is actually also required for the conditional license, but for the annual license, you also need to show a letter from the municipality confirming zoning approval and support. You have to show business plans relating to a plan for regulatory compliance, insurance, environmental impact, safety and security, and job creation, among others. You have to have standard operating procedures in place and show them to CRC. And you have to have a description of the proposed location and proof of site control. So that last one's a big one, especially I'm a real estate attorney predominantly. So this is something that I think about. It might not be that easy finding space to operate your cannabis business because, and that's especially true if you're leasing or need finance. Most small businesses, I mean, most small businesses aren't going to be able to go out to the market and purchase a property in cash. So there's probably going to be some kind of financing involved. And if you're leasing it, your landlord might have financing secured by the property. And it's possible that their loan documents are going to include covenants that say the property cannot be used in violation of law. So as we said before, technically, if you operate a cannabis business, you're technically in violation of a federal law. So there may be a lot of landlords that are hesitant to get involved in the industry for fear that they're violating their loan documents. And it's the same issue if you're looking to buy a property and are looking to get financing. So you can also apply as a micro business. Now, this is a business with a relatively small operation. There's certain requirements that you have to meet. There are residency requirements, both state and municipal. So if I wanted to open a micro business in Voorhees, I would have to show that I was a resident of New Jersey and a resident of Voorhees for certain time periods. There's no more than 10 employees at one time. There's limitations on the physical footprint and the amount of plants and pounds of cannabis that are handled every month. So I think the physical footprint limitation is your footprint can't exceed 2,500 square feet, and you can't possess or acquire more than 1,000 plants each month, or use 1,000 pounds of cannabis each month. But the nice thing about micro businesses is they're given priority review in the application process. So let's go next slide so we can talk a little bit about priority review in the application process. So certain applications are given priority in the review. So we said before that they received 900 applications, and of those 900, as of May 12th, they've reviewed 500. So if you are one of these applications that qualifies as a priority application, your application could potentially go to the front of the line and get reviewed first. So there are 3 types of applications in addition to conditional license application and microbusiness application that are given priority review in the application process. The first are social equity businesses. And these are businesses that are owned by people who have lived in an economically disadvantaged area of the state or who have convictions for cannabis-related offenses. If you look at the map on the left of New Jersey, if you can see in blue, there's not a lot of them, especially in South Jersey, but these are the areas that were designated as economically disadvantaged areas. And in South Jersey, there's zip codes in Camden, Bridgeton, Atlantic City, Fairton, Harrisonville, and Richwood. And then the second bucket of priority applications is diversity owned businesses. These are businesses that are minority owned, women owned, or disabled veteran owned and certified as such by the Department of Treasury. The third bucket is the impact zone businesses. And these are businesses that are located in a designated impact zone. They're owned by people from a designated impact zone, or they employ residents of impact zones. So that's the second map of New Jersey. You can see in gray. There's more impact zones here, and the goal was to target communities that were disproportionately affected by cannabis enforcement, the war on drugs, quote unquote. There are more impact zones and economically disadvantaged zones, and in Camden County alone, Belmar, Berlin, Brooklawn, Camden, Gloucester City, Lindenwold, and Pennsauken apply. So, I mean, basically, if you at least 51% of the ownership interest in the applicant is held by, for example, women, then that business is applying for a conditional micro business license. Your application could almost go to the front of the line. So once you apply, they'll just review your application immediately. Let's go to the next one. So let's talk about a little about municipal involvement. So we said before that the law enables municipalities to prohibit cannabis businesses, and over 70% of municipalities in New Jersey did just this. So that's the red in the map. 98 municipalities will allow dispensaries. That's green in the map. And in South Jersey, that includes Voorhees, Gloucester Township, Evesham, Mount Laurel, Morristown, Cinnaminson, Delran, Pennsauken, Collingswood, Oakland, Barrington, among others. The law enables municipalities to establish numerical limitations on cannabis businesses, to govern the location, manner, and times of operation. They can, for example, require that businesses be located a certain distance from schools, playgrounds, parks, childcare facilities, and places of worship. Those are kind of the sites that are commonly seen as places that the municipalities don't want a cannabis business located near. They can impose a separate local licensing requirement, and they can establish civil penalties for violations of their ordinance. So just as an example, I looked at Morristown's ordinance. They have a max of only 4 licenses, and 50% of those have to qualify as micro businesses. So at least 2 of the Morristown's licenses will be micro businesses. There's a local license that's going to be required, and there are special zoning requirements that any license holder will have to comply with. All right, so what's next? So there needs to be a readoption or revision of the August 2021 rules, because they were only effective for a period not to exceed 1 year. So that's something we'll see later this summer. Holders of conditional licenses are going to apply for conversion into an annual license. And then once those annual licenses are approved, that's when you'll see retailers start to open. Class 3, 4, and 6 applications are eventually going to be opened. I don't know when that's going to happen. There's actually a meeting, a CRC meeting today at 1 o'clock. So it's possible they'll give some guidance on those licenses at that meeting. I don't know. And if you're actually interested, you can go on CRC's website under public meetings, and you can attend the meeting via Zoom if you're interested in that. And then if you want to learn more, I would definitely look at the municipality that you're interested in, just to make sure that they do not prohibit cannabis businesses. I would go to CRC's website, which I think is really good. There's a lot of resources and like FAQs and that type of thing on there that that help. There's an application guide that I think is really useful. And then if you have questions, contact Megan and I.
Excuse me, William, I have a question. I don't see
Yeah.
any references to pricing. Is it like a liquor license? You know, you have to pay so much money for a liquor license depending on what township or municipality you open in. Is there a fee that has to be paid to the state along with an application, or how does that work?
Yeah, there are application fees. They tried to keep them inexpensive because they wanted to involve small businesses in this. So the application fees aren't terrible. The you're going to spend, I think, if you want to apply for this, you're going to spend money using consultants to prepare your business plans, to get your insurance in line, that type of thing. So that's where I think applicants are going to spend most of their money. The law does say that municipalities can require a local license. So I think that's probably going to happen in most municipalities, and that's where the municipality is probably going to charge the licensee another fee.
And Denise, what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years is we're going to see a very similar pattern to what has happened with liquor licenses, because liquor licenses are held, you know, personally by a business. And liquor licenses have been around, you know, since the 1930s. So, I mean, they were a commodity that existed all in our lifetime, were already privatized, and the numbers were maxed out in different municipalities. Here we've got a brand new round of licenses that are open for the first time. So once, for example, like with Morristown, there's only 4 licenses. Once those 4 licenses are owned by private entities or individuals, then there's going to need to be a transfer process, which we don't have rules and regs for yet. And once we get more information on that transfer process, you're going to see the price per license go up.
Oh, it's going to skyrocket.
Private transaction between the parties, because that's what happens with liquor licenses is you've got 2 private parties who are selling their business, and the value of that license, or the ability to even apply for a person-to-person transfer, what have you, of the license when that comes up, that's going to have a big economic price tag that we just don't know what the market's going to dictate it to. But for liquor licenses on the state level, it's like a $250 application fee and a background check. So from the state's perspective, it's a few $100s for an initial application. It's a few $100 when you renew it. The money comes in that private transaction. And because this is so new, we're just not there yet to see what the market is going to dictate. But Will, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's just my perspective looking forward. But do you have an idea on that, on terms of market with these?
Yeah, I think your instincts are dead on, but we're in our infancy here, and it's really tough to tell at this point. But I think that your instincts are correct.
The big I'll tell you just from my perspective, and again, I'm one person, I have a limited perspective on this, but the idea behind regulating cannabis is to bring industry and boost the economy at the end of the day. Like that's like the state's biggest motivator here, is to legalize a new industry that is going to grow the economy, which is why license applications that are in certain economic improvement zones are being fast tracked, and why you have certain geographic areas that are being fast tracked, because the state is looking at this as an economic boost. And because we're in the infancy of it, it's really trying to attract those licenses to those areas in need of that economic boost, so that 5 or 10 years from now, when you have investors or developers or things like that, they're going to be attracted to those places that have the cannabis licenses up. Like that's where they're going to want to be. So this is all part of a very broad economic plan of the state. And because we're so young in it, we can see parallels with liquor licenses, but it's going to be interesting to see how it all shapes out, because the other thing to remember about liquor licenses, we are still following the same laws on the book from 1930, legitimately. They haven't changed. The economy since 1930 has changed dramatically, but it's a very similar turnaround, right? Like historically, you had prohibition in the 20s, it was illegal. And then when they made it legal again, they highly regulated it in an effort to boost economy, right? Because we were coming out of, you know, the Great Depression, and it was a way to boost it up. So it's not surprising that historically, you know, we are trying to do the same thing with marijuana. So there's going to be a lot of parallels.
So there was another question too. I think some of the business owners that are on this call are interested in what happens if you are not a business that has parameters about marijuana usage in place, like say the airlines, you know, you get tested and you know that you can't be smoking pot or doing drugs. But what if there's a business where, you know, you don't have those kind of regulations in place and your employees are coming into work high? What do they do?
So now we get to my part of the presentation. So, well,
That's a great transition.
That is a great transition. Excellent question. So let's talk about employment side of it and give you that perspective. Okay, so marijuana in the workplace. Okay, what's the legal framework? And I'm doing this history lesson because I think it's important to understand how marijuana has already impacted the workplace before it was legalized recreationally. But first we have the New Jersey Compassionate Use Medical Marijuana Act, or CUMA. It was adopted in 2009, so it has been around for a little bit of time. And this basically said you can use marijuana for medicinal purposes and allowed prescription marijuana to be, you know, given out and used. Now, we had issues under CUMA with regard to the medical use of marijuana in the workplace. And we had an interesting court case that came out where our appellate court, so in New Jersey, okay, you have your state courts, you have your trial level court, you have your appellate level court, which is the middle court, then you have the state Supreme Court. So what happened is we had a decision come up in the middle level, on the appellate level, that said nothing in this act shall be construed to require an employer to accommodate the medical use of marijuana in the workplace. That's right out of CUMA. That's in the legislative language. However, in New Jersey, we have the law against discrimination. And the appellate court said that the law against discrimination required protection and prohibited an employer from firing an employee who was taking marijuana as part of a cancer treatment. So we have two conflicting directives, and the appellate court said the lad wins. You can't discriminate against somebody that needs medical marijuana. And then what happened was the state legislature came around and amended the law to say that the employers have to engage in the interactive process. So the legislative branch removed the conflict from CUMA and said, no, if you have someone that needs medical marijuana, you have to engage in that interactive dialogue like you would with anybody else that has a disability. However, you know, the amendment made very clear in CUMA that the employer was not restricted for terminating or disciplining an employee for possession or use of intoxicating, and that's an important word, substances on the premises or during work hours. So how employers read this was, we can prohibit the use of marijuana on premise and during work hours, but we can prohibit the general use of medical marijuana if you're doing it off hours. All right, hold on, I lost my mouse. There it is. Okay. So what happens? Then we had our wonderful November 2020, and 2020, what a year, right? And New Jersey approved a constitutional amendment that legalized the use of marijuana. So we have this constitutional amendment, and I really want to just clarify here how important it is that this is in our state constitution. So when you look at laws, you look at the weight they're given. And in state land, you've got your local ordinances with your town. So we've talked about that a little bit with Will. You have your legislative guidelines, your statutes that are on the state level, where the state legislature has passed a law. That's what CUMA is. And then you've got the amendments, which are your constitution, which is your guiding document for the state of New Jersey. And that's what the voters amended. Okay, the voters amended the state constitution. So cannabis is here to stay. And because it's in the state constitution, it's really, really hard to take it out. So this, if anything, should tell you that the state is putting its full power behind legalizing marijuana. And why? Because they want to make this an economic boost. They want to make it an industry boost. And so if you as an employer are keeping that in the back of your head, it's going to serve you well when you have questions that come up with enforcement. Okay. So then we've got CREMA, okay, which is what Will was talking about from the business perspective in terms of making cannabis a licensed product that can be made, bought, and sold across the state of New Jersey. This law went through a lot of amendments. From the employment perspective, the initial version of this law permitted an employer to take adverse action against an employee that was using marijuana, so long as the employer had a rational basis to do so. And again, rational basis, if you say that term to a lawyer, they have an immediate reaction to it because it's a threshold standard of review that's incredibly easy to meet. So when the law was initially drafted, it was going to give employers a lot of leeway to terminate employees who were using marijuana. This language got deleted. It's not there, and it's not a final part of the bill. So this should be a big ringing bells to you of saying, I, as an employer, can't just terminate these people for using. Instead, there's very specific requirements for when and how an employer can take adverse action. And adverse action means termination, discipline, taking your wages down, losing benefits, etc. for cannabis use. So we're going to just talk a little bit about what the bill requires. So this is super small, and I apologize for you to squint, but it's an extremely important section of the law that you need to understand. So, no employer shall refuse to hire or employ any person or shall discharge from employment or take any adverse action against any employee with respect to compensation, terms, conditions, or other privileges of employment, because that person does or does not smoke, vape, aerosolize, or otherwise use cannabis items. Okay, and that's important. That language is important. However, an employer can require an employee to undergo a drug test upon reasonable suspicion of an employee's usage of a cannabis item while engaged in the performance of the employee's work responsibilities, or upon finding observable signs of intoxication subject to investigation by the employer, and the employer may utilize the results of that drug test when determining the appropriate employment action concerning the employee, including suspension, demotion, or discipline. So what's important? Okay, rational basis, it's gone. Instead, you have very specific regulations. Pre-employment drug testing for marijuana is eliminated unless you are a federal contractor or you have a federal regulated business or industry like airlines, okay, that's regulated federally. You cannot test for marijuana pre-employment. So don't do it, okay? That's the other big thing. If during the course of employment, you do a drug test on someone, you need reasonable suspicion that they are impaired to test for marijuana and discipline. So reading this is really hard for an employer to perform a drug test for somebody if they think that they're high on pot, and it's really hard to fire somebody, because the other item here that's really important is that science has not caught up with marijuana in the workplace. Unlike alcohol, where you can take your breathalyzer test, and if it's over a certain point, you're intoxicated under the law. There is no similar scientific baseline for what is or is not intoxicated for marijuana. So there's no science, okay, that helps an employer here, which is really, really difficult. So what does that mean? Okay. Oh, whoops. Well, we're going to talk about workplace restrictions. It means that you've got to be really careful about drug testing, and it's not going to help you. Okay, so it's probably just better not to do it, is sort of my take on the whole situation. Importantly, however, you've got this caveat, this carve out, okay, where it says nothing in the bill, so nothing in CREMA requires an employer to amend or repeal their commitment to a drug or alcohol-free workplace, or require an employer to permit or accommodate the use, consumption, being under the influence, possession, transfer, display, or sale or growth of cannabis or cannabis items in the workplace, or to affect the ability of employers to have policies that prohibit the use of cannabis items or intoxication during work hours. So an employer can have policies in place that prohibits the use of cannabis items during work hours, and employers can prohibit cannabis items in the workplace. Now, you all should be thinking, if I did this presentation correctly, what is a cannabis item under the law? That's what you should be thinking, because yes, it is defined. Cannabis item means any usable cannabis, cannabis product, cannabis extract, or any other cannabis resin. It does not include medical cannabis under CUMA. So this is really important. Now, because this new law can be read to permit medical marijuana in the workplace. So you've got CUMA that basically said you can prohibit marijuana in the workplace, but now you've got CREMA with the new law that's come out that says, hey, if it's medical, you can't have a policy that prohibits its use in the workplace. So already we've got confusion. So what do you do if you have an employee that is using medical marijuana and they want to use it during work hours and in the workplace? I would say that you need to engage in the interactive process with that person, and you need to treat medical cannabis like you would treat any other prescription drug or opioid, okay? So if you have somebody that is taking controlled substances, different opioids, because they have back pain or whatever, and they're allowed to take those prescription meds in the workplace during work hours, you need to treat medical cannabis the same way. That's the easiest way to deal with this. So interactive process, treat it like any other prescription drug. Recreational marijuana, you need to treat like alcohol, okay? And you can prohibit recreational marijuana from being used during work hours or in the workplace, and you can do that. Now, inevitably, what happens, right, when you get somebody that is in the parking lot, so they're not technically in the workplace, and you see them smoking a joint, and then they come into the workplace? What are you able to do? This is a question that I get a lot. So let's talk about that. You need to figure out if they're intoxicated, which, as we said, is really difficult and really hard because the science isn't there yet. So you can only discipline somebody in the workplace if for marijuana use recreational marijuana use if you have reasonable suspicion that they're intoxicated. But because drug testing doesn't work for this, all right, the law created this new thing called a workplace impairment recognition expert. Everybody's been calling it a wire. Hopefully you've heard of this already. We need to have a wire, you know, in the workplace. We need somebody trained as a wire. So what is this person? This is somebody in your office who is specifically trained to recognize marijuana impairment. They need to get special training from someone for some length of time that's good and needs to be renewed on some annual basis. And why am I talking in really vague terms? Because we don't have regulations yet. Marijuana became recreational and nobody put out any recreations on a wire or wire training. So what does that mean for employers? You're like completely out, hanging out there alone, you know, and you are in a really bad spot is basically what I'm going to tell you. It's not a happy ending right now because we just don't have any type of guidance on who is a wire, how are wires trained, and what do you need to do if you think somebody's high, right? So hard. It's a really difficult time to be an employer, and it's really hard to know when you can and cannot discipline. The little bit that I know about wires, okay, and I know a little this much about them, is that they were used in like public offices, so like townships or municipalities, and they were typically cops that were trained. And even the cops that were trained had lots of issues recognizing marijuana impairment. So it's not perfect. So the reason there's no regulations out is likely because this system with a wire is not going to work because again, marijuana intoxication is very, very hard to show or to prove. So again, the law says that the Police Training Commission is going to work with the CRC to come up with regs, and that just absolutely hasn't happened. So TBD, we're continuing to watch it. When these regs do come out, if they ever do come out, you're going to want to consider having at least 1 to 2 people trained on your staff as a wire, because you're not going to be able to discipline anybody in the workplace unless the wire is present to observe the intoxication. So it's not enough to have the wire come, 3 hours later and review security footage of what happened. The wire is going to need to be present. They're going to need to physically see the person, and they're going to need to make a judgment call. So what does that mean? Oh, we're not even there yet. Okay, remember federal law. So the advice here is federal law still does not legalize marijuana use. So if you have federal contracts, you're a federal contractor, or you're a regulated industry by the federal government, in particular, anybody that does any type of transit and you're regulated by the Department of Transit, you have to very carefully review those restrictions that you have. And when in doubt, federal law wins. So if you, for example, are a trucking company and you're hiring drivers, you're going to need to do a marijuana drug test because that's what the USDOT requires. And what should you do in that situation? You need to put on all your employment applications, all your disclosures that this is a federal contractor, or this government is regulated, this entity is regulated by the federal government, so we're doing marijuana testing. Put it out in the open, bold print, federal regulations apply. That way people have notice. I will say I have still gotten clients that have gotten sued for doing drug testing, even though they did it pursuant to federal law. And New Jersey is working its way through these cases. And they're suing on disability discrimination, or they're suing on just, hey, it's my right now to smoke pot, so why are you discriminating against me? Because in essence, what CREMA does is it elevates the use of marijuana to your other protected classes because it prohibits adverse employment action. It's structured very similarly to Title VII. where it prohibits, you know, adverse employment action for race, gender, national origin, religion, etc. It basically does the same thing for pot users. So you have to treat pot users like you would treat any other protected class at this point, and be very careful about your disciplining. So we just hit this. So in particular, you've got a very clear intersection with medical marijuana with your ADA and your NJ LAD, okay, that prohibit discrimination based on disability. So always engage in the interactive process. Be very aware that the new law can arguably permit medical marijuana in the workplace based on the definition of cannabis items. So that's a little bit different. You may need to engage in that interactive process to see if there is a way to permit the use of medical marijuana in the workplace. Recreational marijuana can absolutely be prohibited, and you can have policies that state that. What are your best practices here? And this is what I've been telling my clients, so I'm happy to share this with you, which is, this is new legislation. If the COVID era has taught us anything, it's taught us how to deal with new legislation that doesn't have a lot of guidance and doesn't have a lot of regulations, which is tread carefully, okay? Be extra cognizant of updates. The CRC website that Will said is really excellent and has a lot of good up-to-date information. You can also view public meetings. So if you suspect your workplace is going to have an issue with marijuana usage, definitely stay up to date on the rules and regs as they are coming out. You need to eliminate regular and routine drug testing for cannabis unless you're required to do it under federal law. And if you are required to do it under federal law, document. Tell your candidate for employment multiple times that this is federal law. That's why we're doing it. If you do random drug testing because you're required to, or anytime you drug test, say that you're doing it pursuant to federal law. You should review your drug-free workplace policies to eliminate any reference to cannabis, okay? Keep your drug-free vague, okay, on what drug is. Don't mention marijuana. Always follow federal law if there is a conflict. Engage in the interactive process for medical marijuana usage, okay? The thing that makes marijuana so tricky is that it is at once a medicine and at once an intoxicating substance. So when you're looking at it as a medicine, treat it like any other prescription medication. When you're looking at it from a recreational standpoint, you treat it like alcohol. But you have to be very clear and make that decision as you're looking on these situations as they come up on a case-by-case basis. Disciplining for intoxication is going to be really, really difficult until we have better understanding of what this wire is, okay? So my advice to you is, unless it's very prevalent that somebody is using recreational marijuana during work hours on your work premise and you have a clear policy that prohibits that, absent that violation, you should not be disciplining for recreational marijuana use. Even if you see somebody in the parking lot smoking a joint and they come into work 10 minutes later, you can't discipline based on that observation in the parking lot. You need to have something else to discipline, because this law is employee friendly and market friendly. Employers got the short end of the stick on this one. So you have to always look at this from the perspective of, this is made to make using marijuana easier. And if I'm making use of marijuana more difficult only because it's marijuana, I will get sued and the lawsuit will be found against me. That's how you have to view it. So one more thing before we hit questions is what I have been telling my clients is, you should look at what about marijuana use in the workplace recreationally is giving you pause. Is it because you think that the workforce, won't be as efficient, that there's not going to be proper grooming or dress or conduct, or timeliness, punctuality? What are the things that are troubling you as an employer? And then look at your existing policies and really have those neutral policies that are based on workplace conduct, not cannabis use. Have a strong policy about being punctual. Have a strong policy about grooming expectations. Have a strong policy about interaction with employees in the office. If you have those strong conduct policies in place and you are disciplining on the conduct that's at issue, you are going to be fine. So don't discipline on the cannabis, discipline on the conduct, and make sure you document the conduct. So with that, we'll take questions. This is our information, so you have it and you can take it down. Definitely reach out to Will or I if you have questions, or you are looking at applying for a license for cannabis, or you are looking at refreshing your workplace policies, or you have an employee issue that's come up that you need some guidance on. We are just a phone call away. I'm going to stop my share and then we'll hit the questions. Great.
Thank you guys so much for your presentation. It was wonderful. So I'm sorry, was somebody just about to ask a question? Okay, I'm just looking through the chat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please. You look through the chat and let us know what came in.
I'm not sure. Did we 4, 5, and 6 class? Were all 3 of those in that slide? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, so they're 5 is actually, they're accepting 5s. I think it's 3, 4, and 6 that they aren't accepting yet. And I don't know when they're going to start accepting them, to be honest. That there's a meeting going on actually starting right now that I'm hoping they'll give some guidance as to whether they'll start accepting those, but I don't know the answer yet.
Okay. All right. And does anyone else have a question?
I think they covered everything really beautifully.
More than we could have asked for. It was great.
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
Wonderful. Well, good luck, everybody. It's a tough world to navigate out there. So we're just a phone call away.
Thank you so much. You guys were great.
I have one question. Are either of you familiar with an organization or a group that is really dependable in terms of information? Like there's so many cannabis events out there and so many organizations. Is there anyone in particular that you would recommend that if you're really looking as an employer, as a business owner, you know, just either A, to keep on top of things, or B, to see, you know, is there opportunity in the space for your business? Is there any one of those organizations that you would recommend or that you've had experience with?
Yeah, not on my end. I haven't really worked directly with those organizations. I worked kind of directly with, you know, employers. So that's really sort of out of my space. I don't know if Will has any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, not if you want more information on the application process, I would start with I think the CRC website's really good and has a lot of good resources and FAQs and information. So I would start there. I mean, they're the person, or they're the people processing the application, so they would know, you know, the answers to all those questions. So I would start there. As far as industry groups, no, I don't really have one in particular that I can recommend. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you guys again, William and Megan. Spectacular information, really interesting, really pertinent, and Denise and I in the group really appreciate it. So it's after 1 o'clock. So Denise, I don't know if you want to just.
I'm going to hop off, guys. Thanks so much.
Okay.
too.
Thank you,
Well,
Megan.
I
Thank you,
think we
William.
covered everything, so I think we could call it a wrap.
Okay, so we just have, do you want to share the information about our upcoming events?
I don't have that in front of me. Hold on.
Okay, so I will. I'll share it.
Okay.
We have a Network Connect in person on June 7th at Jefferson Health. It's at the Jefferson Washington Township Hospital.
At the
I urge
Silvestri
everyone-
building. The Silvestri
Right?
building, the Silvestri building, the brand new building.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful facility, and the hospital is planning, or the organization's planning to invite several of their physicians, and they'll be sharing some information pertinent to our health and particularly women's health. So that's from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. on June 7th in Washington Township. We have our installation breakfast, where our new board is installed. There'll be a keynote speaker, and that will be on July 19th at the Legacy Club at Woodcrest Country Club. And then in August, we're going to have a midsummer fun and networking event, August 16th, 5 to 7 in the evening. And at this point, we believe it's going to be at David Buster's in Blackwood, and we're excited about that. And more information will come out about that. So we just want to thank you all very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. I think that Megan and William just really hit it out of the park and really provided us with some good, solid information. And I hope you guys found it useful. So from Nava, South Jersey, and Denise and me, wishing you all, and Lisa, and wishing you all a wonderful day and a wonderful week.
Thank you, Maria. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.